Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Kristen Manieri is certified as both a habits coach and a mindfulness teacher. She is the author of Better Daily Mindfulness Habits, Simple Changes with Lifelong Impact. She specializes in stress reduction, energy management, mindset, resilience, habit formation, rest rituals, and self-care. As the host of the weekly 60 Mindful Minutes podcast, which is an Apple Top 100 social science podcast, Kristen has interviewed over 130 authors and thought leaders about what it means to live a more conscious, connected, intentional, and joyful life. She has contributed to Huffington Post, Your Tango, Pop Sugar, WestJet Magazine, the Food Network, and the Gottman Institute, among others. Learn more at KristenManieri.com or follow her on Instagram at KristenManieri_. Kristen, what a pleasure to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, Casey. Thank you so much for having me.
Such an honor to have you. I'm going to start out with a question, and I want your opinion on the question. I think you know the phrase, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Do you think that that's
Yeah.
true or false?
I do think it's true. It is true that there is no such thing as a stupid question. And I think what I would really want to say about that is I love curious people. I just think when you meet people that just want to know everything about everything, that's just my favorite type of person. And so I would never want to steal any of that thunder, like take the wind out of any of those sails by saying, that's a stupid question. So yeah, all questions are great.
Okay.
Questioning is great.
Well,
Being curious is great.
That's a very thoughtful and wise answer, and I would expect nothing less from you. Unfortunately, for the first time ever in the history of humans, an opinion is wrong because there actually is a stupid question. And we're going to travel back in time to where you had a podcast scheduled and you said, oh my goodness, I have to reschedule last minute. I'm so sorry. I'm at the urgent care. And the stupidest question you have ever been asked was asked by none other than me when I said, oh, is everything okay? Like, yeah, you stupid idiot. I'm just hanging out at Instacares for the hell of it. Like, yeah, everything's just totally great right now. Thanks. Like that was, as soon as I hit send and that went into Wonka vision, I was like, wow, that was totally dumb.
Oh, that's so funny. You know what? I didn't hear it like that at all. I just heard kindness and caring and just genuine concern. So yeah, it didn't land on me at all like a stupid question.
Well, thank you. That makes me feel a little bit better. I'm assuming everything is okay now without getting into like medical anything.
Yep.
That's great.
Everything's great.
That's great. Awesome. I want to talk about a habit you picked up during the pandemic. A lot of people kind of picked up baking bread, or a lot of people just started eating a lot of junk food, and you decided to start playing an instrument. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So I think if I was to live my life over again, I would probably go to school and study like neuroscience or neuropsychology. And the sciences were never my forte. I was always an English major. And so it would have been a tricky, hard right turn if I had gone that direction. But nevertheless, in my adult life, it's something that I can pursue in terms of a fascination just by reading a ton about it and studying a ton about it. But what I can tell you is that I think the brain is just this incredible, malleable organ that whether we're trying to change a skill or adopt a new skill, or we're trying to get rid of a habit, or even try to change a habitual line of thinking, or basically anything that we do kind of automatically over and over again. I have a very strong opinion or feeling that we can change our minds. And when we change our minds, we can change absolutely everything else, our relationships with other people, our relationship with ourselves. We can change what we do with our lives, the goals that we set. Really, all of it stems from what we're willing to do in terms of rolling up our sleeves and rewiring our own brains. And so one of the things that really fascinates me is the idea that we can, A, pick up a skill at any point in our life, and B, that certain skills really strengthen a part of our brain more than others. And so things like music and dance and languages require not only a lot of memorization, but there's a lot of interconnecting of neuron synapses. And, I won't get too much in the brain science because I certainly would be speaking above my pay grade, but there's just a lot that goes on in the brain when we learn languages and dance and instruments and things like that. And so from a geeky standpoint, now there's a long answer to your question. I've just always wanted to learn an instrument just because I wanted to just make my brain stronger. But also from a mindfulness standpoint, I'm always interested in things that can have me really focus, like really, really drop into the moment. Sometimes for the purpose of feeling really present, but also as a really healthy distraction to maybe stress or boredom or something like that. So I kind of came at the ukulele from both of those angles, at really wanting to make my brain stronger, but also noticing that being very focused and being very present is also really nourishing for me.
Interesting. I'm going to ask you the same question that you just asked your guest on your last show, which was, whenever you're picking up something new, there's going to be a time when it feels like too much work. I don't want to do this today. I don't want to practice a language is one example that you brought up. Have you encountered a lot of resistance along those lines to practicing every day, or, making a ritual out of it?
Yeah. And I think for anyone who wants to start off with something and they have the intention, at least at the beginning, for it to have some legs to it. Maybe I'm not going to pick up the ukulele and say, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. But I had an intention to at least be able to learn to play a few songs, at least be able to learn the basics. And I kind of knew that that at some point it would feel boring, or just like I'd hit a plateau, or my skill level would be such that I needed to get better, and that maybe that would be something harder, and, yada, yada, yada. So I had a teacher that I went and saw every single week. And what was great about going to see Ron, loved Ron, was not only did I get into a nice cadence of improving my skills, like he sort of kept up leveling me, it's time for this song, or it's time to try this chord, but I was also accountable for him. So he'd give me a piece of music to work on between Thursdays. And I needed to practice because I never wanted to go back in the following Thursday and be like, because the first thing we always did at the beginning of our lesson was go over what I had been practicing since the last lesson. So I think knowing ourselves and just acknowledging, like, we're human beings, we're fallible, our will and our intent can weaken over time, and really being deliberate about putting kind of that infrastructure in place that would make it harder for us to just say, screw it, I don't want to do this today. Or, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't even really care about the ukulele. So knowing ourselves, I think each of us being able to see, like, what is my relationship with my commitments, with the things that I want to stick with, but might be hard to stick with, and put those things in place so that we have those kind of bumpers to kind of keep us in our lane.
I love that. What a great answer. My dad had a record player growing up, and I remember he had a record with Steve Martin, and it was Steve Martin's Stand Up, which, by the way, like, still holds up today, like super, super funny stuff. And he would bring a banjo on the stage, and he'd be like playing the banjo, and everybody would be into it. And I remember one particular joke that he would tell is like, it's really impossible to be sad playing the banjo. And he starts playing the banjo on this like twangy tune. He's like, death and misery and gloom and despair and murder. It's like super funny. I feel like the ukulele would be about the same. Like, can you be unhappy playing the ukulele?
I don't think so. It is a lovely instrument, and it is a pretty easy instrument to learn. I think that's probably a third reason why I started with the ukulele, is just that it's not difficult. It's not heavy. The chords are not metal, so they don't, or the strings are not metal, so they don't hurt your fingers. It's definitely fun. And Steve Martin is an amazing banjo player.
I think he's like, I don't know if it's to this day, but I know for a long time was like one of the top 3 or 5 best banjo players in the world. Like, incredible. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, he's good.
Amazing. Okay. So I want to dive into mindfulness with you, but before we do, I would love to hear your story and how mindfulness first kind of came into your consciousness.
Well, I kind of moved into an interest in self-development and personal development about 20 years ago, when one of my early jobs in my 20s, I started working for a motivational speaker. And it's really, to me, one of those forks in the road of my life. Like, I don't think we get many of them. I think we often think that we're at forks in the road, but this definitely was a moment in time where I met someone, my boss and his wife, who were massive influences on me. And for the first time in my life, I think I was 22 when I met them. It occurred, or 24 actually, it occurred to me that my life was designable. Like it wasn't something that was just happening to me, that I could actually be someone who participated in the creation of whatever it was that I was creating in my life, whether it was my relationships or what I did for my career. And I didn't really think about it up until that point. It just sort of was falling into one thing after another, almost like accidentally without a lot of thought. So working with Richard and Sue and kind of being steeped in that world of personal development and personal growth I was with them for almost 6 years, that awakened that curiosity in me to learn more, to grow more. And then I think it was actually when I had kids that I really started to see the day-to-day value of it, that it wasn't just about me becoming my best self for that, just intrinsically, just to see what we're each possible and what's possible for each of us in this lifetime. It became less about that when I had kids and more about this, gosh, I don't want to say pressure, but I think just colossal responsibility that we have as parents to be our best, because we're modeling all the time. They're watching way more than they're listening. But B, I just don't want to mess up my kids. Like, honestly, I think that's like at a bare minimum. I think as parents, let's just not mess up our kids. That would be just a great goal. And so I started to really kind of had that, not that pit, like a pit in the stomach, or not a tightness in my chest of just feeling like, am I really doing the best I can be? And that doesn't look like perfect sandwiches and, girls with perfectly braided hair. I rarely make sandwiches, and I don't know how to braid their hair. I'm not talking about that kind of parenting. I'm talking about being with them with presence, honoring each of their human path, whatever it is that they're here to do, making space for whoever it is that they are, just loving them, just being alive and being patient and present and aware enough to just really enjoy the journey as a mother. And so I realized that mothering is so busy, and life in general is just so busy and sometimes overwhelming, that if I didn't make time to sit and come back to myself, to actually be present to what is it that I'm up to today? What am I valuing? What are my priorities? Is it matching what I'm actually doing? Is it matching what I believe in? If I didn't take time to do that every single day, then I was just kind of living in automation, reacting to life around me. And so I just remember in 2017 in the summer, just waking up with, almost like a panic attack and thinking, I have to do this. I have to spend this time every day. And from that point on, I just started waking up before everybody, sometimes before the sun, and just sitting and sometimes meditating, journaling, reading, and just carving out 20 to 60 minutes every day, depending on what I've got, and just doing the work of really reflecting on how I was living my life and how kind of mother I was being. So that's the biggest part of it, I think, is just getting that wake up call in 2017 and realizing I had to make the space to do this work.
What is your first memory after 2017 of feeling like, at least for a moment, you got it, like you found it, this was worth it, this was worth the work? Do you have a distinct memory of that?
I think that the great thing about parenting is that when you start to do the inner work, you start to see it immediately. So I can't say, Casey, there was one moment where I was like, oh my God, I chose differently. I was aware, I was awake in that moment, and I chose differently, because there are countless times in our day where we can come into the moment, actually be present, and choose to say something with more love, or to not say something at all, or to just take a moment to catch our breath and slow down, or to, put the jar of pickles back in the fridge rather than leave them on the counter. All these things, all day long, we have these choices to either serve our human self, our sort of surviving, fearful, needy, compulsive self, or our higher self, the one that we can spend time with and get to know and say, what matters? Like, who am I? And so I can't tell you like, oh my gosh, there was this one definitive moment where I was like, boom, like I'm getting this. But it just started to just happen over and over and over. And look, I still have plenty of moments where I'll reflect later and think, I'm not getting this. Oh my gosh, that was such a mistake. Why did I do that? Why did I say that? I wish I hadn't have done that. But I can tell you that there's many, 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 many more where I can drop into a moment and just be with people or be with myself or be with a moment. And I'm there and I'm present and I'm choosing and I'm deliberate and I'm intentional. And it just feels like a more conscious way to live.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I love what you said earlier about living life on autopilot. And to me, it was like, why didn't anybody tell me that I could go out and create what I wanted rather than do life in the way that I think everybody else is doing life? You think there's only one way and there's so many other different ways. You mentioned mindfulness and the work of mindfulness. Can you describe a little bit what that means? I think there's so many people out there that think like, yeah, I would love to be more mindful in my day, but I'm not going to go to Tibet and, live as a monk for 13 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love that question. So I think that mindfulness as a state, like a quality that we're supposed to have, like I'm a mindful person, like I'm a patient person, I'm frugal, like whatever it is a really difficult thing. It's kind of a bit of a slippery fish, like to grab onto, because it's hard to quantify. Like, well, how much mindful? I'm 80% mindful. Like I'm mostly mindful. So what I aim for is creating more mindful moments, like more opportunities. And I think of it more like doorways that I walk through than states that I just exist in. And so the work is, how do I practice having more of those mindful moments? And so meditation can be one of those. All we're doing in meditation is we're just sitting and we're training the mind to notice when we're not present and to come back to the present. That's all it is. So people think, oh, I shouldn't be thinking. And it's like, that would be like running hurdles and saying there shouldn't be hurdles there. Like you need the hurdle there in order to jump over it. Like you need the thought in order to notice, oh, my thought, I've been thinking about breakfast tomorrow, for the last 5 minutes. I've got to go back to being whatever I was intending to concentrate on, this moment, this breath, whatever it is. So I think the work, when we talk about rolling up our sleeves, is finding a way to practice and putting them in our lives. It could be creating the habit of, when I turn my car on, just stopping before I reverse and turn the radio on and figure out where I'm going. It's just stopping for 10 seconds and just doing a quick body scan. Where am I at? How am I feeling? What's going on? What's going on in my mind? What's going on in my heart? What's going on in my body? So to me, the work is finding the 2 or 3 or whatever practices that have these mindful moments happen, and then just doing them really, really consistently without this idea like we're supposed to be getting somewhere or there's like a top to this mountain. It's not like that. It's just practice for no other reason than practicing helps. And it feels good, when we can embrace it as something that we're supposed to just do for no other reason than it feels good. Not like we're supposed to become like Olympic level mindfulness people. Like there's no awards, there's no medals,
Oh, dang.
no trophy.
I didn't know anybody tell me. Yeah, I remember, I believe it was Jason Mraz who was saying like, why do we always forget? If it feels so good, to be in a mindful state, why do we always forget? And he said he just believes it's for the gift of remembering. You get to remember and come back over and over and over as many times as you're willing. And I thought that was a really beautiful way to put it. I wonder if you had the same experience that I did when this kind of, came about in my life and I wanted to live a little bit more consciously. It feels really good. And you read the book and the book is like, wow, that was amazing. I want to read 2 more books. And then you want to read 5 more books. And all of a sudden you're kind of trapped in this cycle of like, you're learning about being mindful, but you're not doing the work you should have done. The first book told you. Is that something you have experienced with some of the people you work with?
Yeah, I can definitely say that there were times in my life where I would pick up a book that I had read, maybe 6 months before, maybe 6 years before. And I couldn't even tell you what was in it. I could tell you that at the time it made a difference for me and I recommended it to 10 people and I can see that I underlined a whole bunch of it, but like it wasn't sticky. And I can tell you that I went through a period of time where that felt really frustrating to me. And so I would kind of journal more about what I read. And I still do that. I still aim for things. There's things that we can do to make what we learn stickier for sure. Learning skills, study skills and things like that. But I think what you're talking about is like, why does it feel like I'm always a beginner? Like I always seem to be coming back. I always have to relearn this stuff. I'm always forgetting. And I've really just come to just embrace that as human beings, our default is in many ways just survival and fear and looking good and making sure I'm saying the right thing. So I'm belonging and I'm fitting in. And I'm like, it's kind of in our very deep ancestral tribal nature to really aim to belong and to be loved and to feel safe. And those are such basic human needs and they need to be there. Like our human side, our sort of mammalian selves are necessary for us to survive. We can't eliminate them. But we do have a higher self. We have a conscious self and we have to keep kind of feeding that self. And so I think of it less as like, wow, I've read all these books already. Shouldn't I be somewhere? And more about like, I just keep doing it to return myself back to the conversation, whether it's a podcast or whether it's a book or whether it's a retreat, or it's just something that I do just like exercise. I don't exercise once or twice and think, all right, woohoo, I did it. I got the body that I wanted. Like I have to keep coming back to it over and over and over. So it's like, I think of it like this exercising my spiritual self or communing with my spiritual self. And they start to blend, like my human side and my sort of spirit side starts to kind of, they dip into each other. But I hear you. I think we have to embrace our innate imperfection, and that we just need to keep coming back to the work over and over again.
I love that because you're talking about actually doing the work versus just getting trapped in like this. It's almost like an avoidance behavior where you're continuing to learn about it without actually taking the time to do the work. We can't talk about books at all without talking about your book list. Holy smokes. Amazing, amazing book list on your website. I've taken a bunch of them that I haven't read, a few of them that I have, like Thanks 1,000 is on there, Essentialism, Atomic Habits is on there. It just absolutely wonderful books. And there's one in particular that is, it seems to be really special. It's certainly my favorite book. I don't know if it's yours. And it has this almost like magical power of like popping up in a person's life right at the time that they most needed it. And that was certainly my experience. I'm really curious to hear your experience on how you found The Untethered Soul.
I'm so glad you asked that question because you and I were talking before we started recording about how much I love to go into used bookstores. I've been in used bookstores all over the US, in Europe. I mean, if we go to a new town, I need to figure out where the used bookstore is. And I have this kind of weird superstition, or I don't know what you'd call it, but I think when I enter a used bookstore that there is a book in there that I'm meant to have. And somehow it went from this person to being donated to maybe from Goodwill, and then it got bought, and somehow it ended up in this used bookstore, and I'm meant to have it. And that's exactly how I ended up with The Untethered Soul.
Wow.
I know I was in Portland, Oregon. I was in a Goodwill. I can't remember why we had gone in there. It wasn't for books. I think we were staying in an Airbnb and I needed to get like a kettle or, something like that. And I thought I'll just go to the Goodwill. And then of course I wandered over to the used book section and there it was. And I was like, wow, I've always wanted to read this book. I've heard about it so many times. And I picked it up and I read it again and again, a few times a year. I've based entire 6 weeks courses, not based, but that was sort of like our reading material for some courses that I've done. I've probably gotten, I don't know, I want to say at least 100 people to read that book. So yeah, that book is really at the core of just what makes sense to me.
Wow. Yeah, me too. It was such an amazing resource for me at a really difficult time of life. And yeah, it just made such an impact on my life. I also will read it at least annually and take something different out of it. It's interesting to read the same content and feel like you understand it, but in a new context this year and the next and the next. It's a very special book. You mentioned journaling as a tool that can really help you with mindfulness. Can you describe what your journaling practice is? This is something I know for me in particular, and a lot of the clients that I have, like journaling sounds like a really good idea, but we don't even know where to start.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've done it for so long that I forget that, oh yeah, I had a way in at one point, and that's how I ended up getting started with journaling. And now it kind of takes on all different forms. But yeah, it's easy to forget when you've been doing something for a long time to figure out, okay, what could be this person's way in? And so for me, journaling could look like me just needing to write out something that's kind of gotten all muddled up in my mind, maybe a decision I'm trying to make, or something, a situation that I'm in that I'm struggling with. Maybe I just feeling out of sorts and I don't know why. I'm just kind of writing down like, why am I feeling so lost, or why am I feeling so down, or whatever. So it kind of, it almost serves as like a sounding board just for me to get what I need to say, or what I'm thinking about, what I need to just get it out of my head. But it also can be just where I might list, like, what are my intentions for today? Like, what do I see as my day ahead? And like, how do I want to be in it? It could be ideas that I have. I know James Altucher, I read in one of the Tim Ferriss books, I think it was Tribe of Mentors or something like that, or I can't remember. But he said that he spent like 30 minutes every day just thinking about different problems in the world and how to solve them. It created like so much, it just stirred up all of his creative juices, and it got him really thinking with a lot of ingenuity and creativity and stuff. So it could be anything. And the thing is, I think whether we're talking about mindfulness or meditation or journaling or, whatever it is that we're trying to cultivate in our spiritual life, unfortunately, we have this thing this way that we're supposed to be doing it right. Like somewhere along the line, we picked up that journaling is supposed to be X, or meditation is supposed to look like that. And we need to make ours look like that. And, not only does that just create a breeding ground for just feeling not good enough, but also the way that you think you should be doing it just might not be what works for you. There's a great book called Writing Down Your Soul. And in it, she writes about how she writes like she's talking to God. And that really works for her. And she writes like God is talking back to her. And it could be the Dalai Lama. It could be, your favorite uncle. It doesn't really matter. But she just loves this idea of creating a dialogue in her journal. So there's just no right way. To me, it's like, just keep trying until it feels authentic, until it feels like good. That's kind of a good barometer. If it feels good, keep doing that.
Yeah. Wow. I really like that. Do you care about the quality of what comes out? Like, are you trying to write the perfect sentence or?
Oh gosh, no. In fact, I got a Remarkable journal, which is, it's like this digital paper. It's great. I love it. And it's great for clients because it allows me to have different notebooks for each person. So I don't have to be flipping through my journal looking for what we were talking about in the last session. But I cannot stand my handwriting. And so it's not even for me at times, it's not necessarily what I'm writing. It's that I cannot stand my handwriting. And so what I love about the Remarkable is it has like a calligraphy option, and it makes my handwriting look like this ancient scroll.
Wow.
I absolutely love it. But yeah, I am not writing poetry. None of it's ever going to get printed. I don't care about my spelling. I don't care about punctuation. I'm really just trying to process what's stuck all muddled up in the inside and try to make sense of it on the outside.
I love that. So what came first, the journaling practice or the process of writing your book?
Oh, definitely the journaling process. Yeah, I've been journaling for a really long time, and I didn't start writing my book until last late November was when I started writing the book. So yeah. And now journaling, writing a book, I do get a little caught up in the outcome of it, the process of getting it right and doing it right. I could see my perfectionist side rear its ugly head many times during that process.
What made you decide to write a book about mindfulness habits?
Honestly, I think like most people like the idea of more mindfulness, can see how it would benefit, can see how it would just make my relationships better, my relationship with myself better. Like, I don't think there's a lot of people that argue with that mindfulness is great. It helps us to be more aware and more awake in our lives. But I think like everybody, I forget to be mindful. I think Sharon Salzberg said it, mindfulness is great when we remember to do it, right? It's like, okay, so how do I remember to do it? And so at the sort of middle to beginning of 2020, I just started reading all these habit books. And I think, as you probably know, as well as all the listeners know, like they're kind of all the rage, all these books about habits. And so I kind of fell into that wormhole as well. And it was like getting struck with a 2x4. I was like, oh, that's how you have more mindfulness. You create habits that create opportunities to be more mindful, that actually stop you in your tracks, get you out of your kind of automation mode so that you can do whatever practice it is that has you return to the moment, or return to yourself, or return to your food or the conversation, or whatever it is. So it was interesting that just that evolution of seeing mindfulness as such a core kind of component of my life. And then realizing that habits is how you integrate it, how you actually have more of it in the everyday, boring, ordinary days of our lives is through habits.
So I know you've already given us a few, but can you take us through a situation, like a practical situation of how that might look for somebody? Something like maybe really common that you see a lot?
Sure. Well, one of the habits that I wrote about in the book, which is definitely attributed to my friend Sarah, who's a functional nutritionist, and she's really interested in food and how we can eat better. But when I asked her, like, what would be some of your favorite mindfulness practices around eating, she said, stop preloading your fork. So it's just such a simple thing, but it's the practice of, after you've filled up your fork and filled up your mouth, you put your fork all the way down. Because we don't do that. What we normally do is we get the next forkful ready to go, and we're kind of holding it suspended in midair, chewing, maybe not even swallowing it all. Like maybe some of it's ending up in cheeks or whatever, and then shoving the next one in. Yeah. Whereas to have an approach to dinner or breakfast or lunch, it doesn't really matter, with reverence and with gratitude and presence, not only for the people we're eating with, but for the actual food. I know you and I both said we loved the book Thanks 1,000 by, is it J.J. Abrams? Is that how you say his name?
Yeah, I think that's right.
He takes something as simple as his morning coffee, and he traces it back to literally thousands of people who have some sort of part, whether they were creating the plastic lid, or they were roasting the coffee, or transporting the coffee, or growing the coffee, or packaging the coffee. Like he realizes, holy cow, like I got a lot of people to thank every time I take a sip of my morning coffee that he picked up at his local cafe. So if we're interested in that, if that's something that we would want to create, is more gratitude for how the food ended up on our plate, then it really would behoove us to be able to change some of our eating habits so that there was more presence. And one way to do that is to literally just put your fork down in between bites. And it's hard. I vacillate between, I can be on a roll for a while, and then, maybe we travel or we've got guests in town, and I completely forget to do that again. But it's a simple practice that we could do anytime, anywhere. It doesn't cost anything. But it's just an easy one to start being more present when we're eating.
I love that. I think that's a great coaching tip. We've used that before with some of our clients as well. And it's like, how many meals have you eaten in your life that you didn't even taste the food?
Totally.
And if somebody is concerned that they're eating too much, like what a great way to make sure that you're slowing down, you're waiting for your hunger cues to tell you when you've had enough, and you're paying attention to the taste or the conversation with loved ones. I love that tip. I love that you brought up the coffee lid. I think that was my favorite part of the Thanks 1,000. Have you ever thought that much about a coffee lid before?
No, definitely not. But it's really interesting how life becomes really good when we start to notice what's good about our life. And we know this because this is why we travel. Like when we're traveling, we notice the coffee cup, because it's different, or we notice the placemat, or we notice the sunrise, or we notice the architecture and all of that. And our brain notices because it's like, oh yeah, this is brand new. It's scanning for novelty. It's seeing something it's never seen before. But through mindfulness, we can take that same level of attention and bring it to everything we do. And it might not be like, wow, look at my car. Like, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying being able to go like, wow, I'm so glad I have this car. I'm glad that I'm going to be able to get where I want to go with this car. Obviously, it's a kind of dialed down version of what we would experience when we're traveling, but we know that it feels really good to be present, to tune in to the deliciousness of life, that it's actually where life is lived. We don't live life when we're just thinking about life. We live it when we're here, actually tasting it or watching it or listening to it or, drinking it in.
I love that. And it's interesting that you mentioned travel in, the last, 18 months, a lot of us were restricted with travel, but you also talk a little bit about at-home retreats. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was something that, again, I think a lot of people can look at the last 18 months and see what was awful, for so many people. But I've heard from many, many people who found these little silver linings, these little gifts. Maybe it was their schedule changed. So they didn't have a commute anymore. And so they had more time with their kids or more time to exercise or things like that. And so I had retreats booked. Like I was supposed to actually be going places. And they ended up being at-home retreats that I had to do virtually. And they were fantastic. I thought that they were great. And I would zoom in and, be with 30, 40, 50 other people meditating and things like that. But then besides that, without needing to sign up for something and register and pay a fee, I started doing at-home retreats just by myself, just taking 1 or 2 days. I'm lucky at the time, my husband had an office, like we'd converted a shed into his office. So I did have space that was outside of our home, which certainly makes it a lot easier. But the bigger part was just coaching my kids and my husband and saying, look, I'm not going to be talking all weekend. I'm going to be out there. I'm going to be meditating. I would line up articles that I wanted to read, or maybe books or videos, maybe a Tara Brach video that I wanted to make sure to watch. So it wasn't like I was meditating for the entire time, but I just wanted to just hit the pause button. And I could tell you, after the year that I've had, I'm overdue by a long shot with that. I just feel it very, very deep in my bones that it's time for me to go somewhere and get really, really, really quiet again. So that was the gift for me in terms of a silver lining of just realizing that I don't have to go spend a ton of money and get on a plane and go to a fancy retreat center, or even a not fancy retreat center, that I can find retreat in my own life if I bring a lot of intention to it.
I love that. I love so much talking about, amidst all the horribleness, people taking advantage and creating new things. It was an opportunity to kind of reset and reevaluate things. And so I love taking those opportunities. And I also love that you're right. You don't need a whole lot to just take time for yourself. And I guess you kind of answered my next question I was going to ask, which is how do you know when it's time to take that? Is it really just kind of a feel thing?
That's such a good question. I think yes. And it's difficult to heed that. And so I like looking for new beginnings all the time in my life. So for example, a new season is a new beginning. Like someone could look at that and say, you know what, I'm always going to take the first day of fall and I'm going, or the first day of a new season, and I'm going to just take that day off and I'm just going to rest and think about what just passed, what's to come. It could be, I know for a lot of people, their birthday is a big time for a new beginning, a reset. New Year's Eve, obviously. New Year's Day is a big one. So being able to look at our lives, you could say maybe the first of every month, I'm going to just take the afternoon and just be by myself, or maybe it's every Sunday or whatever it is. But I can definitely attest to how challenging it is when that need arises. And now I have to figure out how to fit it into my busy life. I think it's easier to say, okay, the third month of, every third month, I'm going to take 2 days off and go be by myself. And that way, surely when I get there, I'll be like, oh God, thank God, thank God I'm here. It's kind of easier to schedule it in versus try to find it when it's almost too late, when we're sort of desperate for it.
Yeah, that was my first thought too, is like, I'm trying to think like in my busy day, like how would I ever be able to fit that in? It's like, yeah, duh, like schedule it out ahead of time, weeks or months, so that it's coming, you've got something to look forward to, and then you can schedule around it. That's a really good tip. I like that.
Well, and I think surrounding ourselves with people who remind us of that. I was literally just texting with a friend of mine, Wendy from Boulder this morning, who asked that exact question. Like, when are you going to go sounds like you need to take some time for yourself. When are you going to go take a time for yourself? And I found myself kind of doing that knee jerk excuse of like, oh, I don't know. And then I just looked at my calendar. I was like, Sunday, I'm going to go spend some time by myself on Sunday. And I'm 100% committed. Now I'm saying it to you too, Casey. So now I'm extra committed. I am going to go spend a few hours by myself. I really, really, I need it.
I love that. It's out there, universe. Give her Sunday. That's awesome. You talk about your favorite form of exercise, which is also my favorite form of exercise, which is walking. Can you tell us a little bit about how walking has benefited you in your life?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I just think it's a great reason to be outside. I think it's amazing how inside focused we all are. It's crazy. It's just a habit. It's just a habit of being inside. And I really do need to create a habit of just being outside more. So certainly having like a daily walk that's just in my structure is great. I don't have that right now. We've moved and kind of all of my habits are kind of got tossed upside down. So I'm looking to return to that, but we've also moved somewhere where hiking is a pastime, where I lived before, it wasn't something you would do in your spare time. Like if you were to say to someone, hey, what did you do last weekend? You would rarely hear someone say, I went hiking. Whereas where I live now, it's almost certain that someone's going to say to you, wow, I went hiking. So I think for me, just being outside, being in beauty, just returning to just the awe and wonder of life is so restorative for me. I love walking with someone else. Like I love just walking and talking. I just love the way conversation just unfolds so easily and unguardedly when you're walking side by side versus when you're looking straight at someone. It's a really great way to have difficult conversations. Walking side by side with someone. I think my husband and I have saved ourselves probably hundreds of thousands of dollars in marriage therapy because we walk and talk. We just walk it out. Let's go have a walk. Let's figure this out. Let's just keep talking. And, the tougher the moment, the more you'll see us doing laps around our neighborhood. So yeah, it's just, to me, it's just a great way to get mental clarity. I get very creative on walks by myself. I try not to take, well, I shouldn't even say try not. I just don't take my phone. I don't listen to podcasts. It's just not a place where I listen to them. I listen to them in the car, but it's a great time to just be with my thoughts and get creative and maybe solve some problems. And yeah, I love it.
I love that. I'm so glad you mentioned walking side by side. It's so much less confrontational. There is absolutely something to that. You feel like you're kind of like going through the journey with the person rather than like looking at them and feeling like you're almost like against them or something.
Yeah, it is. It's a great place to have tough conversations and emotional conversations and things like that. I've had all of my girlfriends, we have had at some point some sort of ritual of like, this is when we go walk. Maybe it's like my friend Samrithi, we go walking when our two kids are in Kung Fu together, or, another mom is like, well, let's meet at school, drop the kids off and go for a walk. Or even, I remember my friend Erica saying to me, like, let's meet up next week. And then she's like, I don't want to just like have happy hour or something like that. Like, can we just go for a walk? I'm like, yes, I'd love to do that. So I think when we get in the habit of exchanging a walk for like, let's go shopping, let's go get a coffee, let's go have a drink. Like, no, let's just walk. It's not only cheaper, but it's just better. I just think it's a better experience. And when you're not being distracted by pouring your sugar in or ordering another drink or whatever it is, it's just much more connective.
Totally. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. I love that. My favorite manager I ever had would do walking meetings with me, and we would talk about difficult things in business. And you know what? Like, we figured things out and we came up with creative ideas. I think the creativity thing is totally true as well. Yeah, I hope people try to find more opportunities to get outside and walk. Most of us could be doing a little bit more of it. And you're right, it's just such an enriching practice and amazing for so many different reasons. I'm curious now, you got me really curious. Where did you move to?
Victoria, British Columbia.
Oh, nice. I've heard it's beautiful up there.
Yes, we went from very flat Florida to very mountainous and hilly and green British Columbia. Yeah, it's beautiful.
That sounds amazing.
We love it here.
That's awesome. We talked a little bit about gratitude, and I've heard you talk about a better way to have a gratitude practice. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think what you're referring to is the year that I took on writing a thank you note, 365 thank you notes. So a thank you note a day. And I always thought it would be a nice thing to do, to just have a better practice of writing thank you notes. If someone gives you a gift or takes you out for lunch or whatever. But I just thought, wow, what would it be like? Like, how much more gratitude and gratefulness would my life be steeped in if I really did take on the practice of writing a thank you note every single day for 365 days? And so I did. And what I can tell you is that when we go to articulate it, instead of just saying, hey, thanks, or writing to someone like, thank you, when we actually have to put, you've got a little more paper that you've got to fill up, and you actually have to put words to exactly what you're thanking someone for. And it could be a close friend, a relative. It could be the way someone checked you out at a grocery store. I don't mean like check you out like, hey, baby. I mean like put your groceries in a bag. It really, it starts to really affirm that person, what it is that they did that was great. And you really like put detail and language to it. But the more that we put detail and language to what's good, like what's right in our world, the more it's like what we appreciate appreciates. It's like, if I say to my husband, thanks for helping me out last weekend, that's nice. Oh, you're welcome. No big deal. But if I say, because this week I have so much going on and I just am really grateful that you took care of all of that. And now, like he set up my desk last weekend, and being able to say to him, thank you so much for setting up my desk. Like, I feel so much more on top of things, and I feel so much more settled and just like productive now that I have a workspace. And it really makes a huge difference to me that you took the time to just do all that. Like, thank you so much. So to me, it's like going through to, articulating with some actual detail what it is that I'm thanking someone for makes me feel so much better. Like, I'm so present to how thankful that I am. And then, of course it makes the other person feel like $1,000,000 too. So yeah, it's just, it was a great practice. I loved it. When I was done my year, I was like, okay, good. I feel complete. It wasn't something that I kept up with, but it was a great little experiment to do for a year.
I love that. I love it's, paper and a pen, not an email, not a voice message, not a text, like it's actual tactile. I don't get the opportunity to do it as much as I used to when I was working at a big corporate gym. But after the first appointment I would have with somebody, I would always send them a thank you note. And it's almost like they were like blown away by it. And a thank you note is also something that people, I believe, tend to kind of keep. It's almost like they want to like hold on to that kind of feeling that somebody really recognized me. They took time to sit down and put pen to paper and send this out to me. That's pretty impactful.
Yeah. And for me, I love getting mail. I definitely still send a lot of thank you notes. I don't send them every single day, but I love it. And I love getting them. And yeah, I think it's a great practice. It feels very nostalgic and kind of old school, but I like that.
Sure. Yeah, me too. That's awesome. Okay. I wanted to ask you before we get off here, I wanted to ask you a little bit about getting centering and some centering practices that you imply. And I guess we should probably back up a little bit. What is centering in your opinion?
It's really just finding a time in the day. And I know with habits, the more that you choose the same time and the same place, and the more that you create a ritual around time and place, the easier it is to make a habit. It's just habit science kind of 101. But it's really just creating a time and space and every single day to just return to yourself, to just get grounded. And for some people, that might look like making a big inventory of everything that I'm worried about or everything that's kind of left undone. That's kind of, I don't know, just keeps popping up in my mind. It could be everything that I'm feeling grateful about. It's a moment to just take all the swirling and all that kind of floating and kind of come back down to earth. So I talk about centering practice, a grounding practice. That could be just, for some people, it could be praying. It could be reading the Bible. It could be journaling. It could be reading a really interesting spiritual book or self-development book. It could be just making notes. It could be preparing, looking ahead to your week and thinking, okay, what needs to get done, but not like planning, but like, what have I got coming up and how am I feeling about all of that? So it's a real opportunity to just turn inward and see what's going on. How am I feeling? What's sort of buzzing around inside of me? And then tending to that. If I'm feeling like, wow, I'm really anxious or I'm really tight, or I just seem to be really swirling right now. What do I need? Do I need to make a list so that I've got everything down? Do I need to breathe? Do I need a nap? Do I need some water? Like, what is it that I'm needing right now? So that's the main thing. And then once you have created that time and space, then sort of intuitively, it's like you show up in it. Like, what am I needing? Do I need a meditation today? Do I need to just pray? Do I need to journal? It's really totally open to the individual.
And I like the idea of doing it in the morning before the busyness of the day kind of takes over, and really being, taking a lot of intent, I guess, and kind of setting a tone for the day. I like the idea of doing that, but also you make it sound like it's always a practice you can go back to as needed throughout the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And for some people at the end of the day, my work, I don't manage a lot of details. I don't manage a lot of, commitments. I've streamlined my business life down to very simple, but there was a time when I did have a lot of deadlines and I had a lot going on, a lot swirling. And so doing a centering at the end of the day where I was sort of putting everything back down, what do I've got, what got done today? What do I need to do tomorrow? So that those worries, or those, maybe not even worries, but that kind of like ticker tape of like, if you're looking like stocks, like you don't want that waking you up at 2:00 in the morning or at midnight or whatever, because the brain is going to be like, oh, hey, now that you're not so busy, here's the 15 things that we need to talk to you about. So having that practice at the end of the night is great for some people as well.
Yeah, that's a really good and valuable tip. Your podcast, 60 Mindful Minutes, is in my regular rotation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean that as a high compliment because, as a podcaster, you have to do quite a bit of research and learning about other people. But I really love it. The content is great. Your guests are amazing. What is something you're looking forward to with the podcast?
Wow, that's such a good question. I can't think that I am looking forward to anything. It's almost like if someone was to ask me that about my kids, like I just love where it is now. Like where it is now is great. Like I love the guests that come. I love the books that they write. I love the process. It's just, yeah, I don't have this sense of like I'm trying to get somewhere with it. It's just a great experience. It's a great expression. It's a great way to just stay in the work of just learning and being curious and growing. So yeah, I have nowhere I'm trying to get with it. I just enjoy it.
You have just one life. You definitely do need a trophy. We got to find somebody to give you a medal or trophy. That was one of the best answers for any question I've ever gotten. That's fantastic. You have just won life. Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
It's so.
Do I get some chocolate or something?
I'll send you some chocolate and a gold star with the thank you note for sure. For sure. I mean, how much time do we all spend just running around looking for more and more and more and more when everything we ever needed is right in front of us and we're just wasting our time missing it?
Yeah. I mean, you just described the modern human existence, unfortunately.
Totally crazy.
And some of us get a wake up call. For some of us, COVID was a wake up call. For some of us, it's cancer, it's a heart attack, it's anxiety attacks. It's, I don't know, but my hope is that everybody at some point gets some sort of wake up call, and that it's not necessarily a disease or a crisis, but just a moment to realize, like, how is this working for me? Like, I'm signed up for this sort of culture and this conditioning, and like, is this working? Like, is this actually what I want? And I think a lot of people, when they start to ask that question, they feel selfish. But to me, I think that without asking these tough questions and looking and seeing, what is it that I'm supposed to be contributing? What was I here to do? That is selfish. Like, that living in just a meh kind of existence, that is selfish, because then you're not shining whatever it was you were supposed to shine. So to me, it's always great to keep asking, like, is this it? Like, is this what I'm meant to be doing? Does this align for me? Do I feel that alignment? So yeah, it's, and going back to asking what you were saying about the centering practice, like, that's when you do it, in your journal, that's when you ask those questions. Is this working for me? Am I really aligned with my life? And you won't know unless you make the space to ask those questions.
Oh, what a beautiful answer. That's amazing. What is one simple tip you would like to give somebody who's listening to this conversation and thinking, like, I would love to be more mindful, but I don't really know kind of where to start, and it seems impossible? I know we kind of talked about this earlier, but I'd like to see if we can distill down just one simple thing that we can leave the listener.
I think going to bed at night, not to watch TV, not to be on your phone, but just taking the last 10 minutes before you fall asleep and just being present, just being in your body, in your bed, in that moment. We're all going to end up in our bed at some point anyway. So there's nothing extra you need to do there. You're all going to go there at some point today. You don't have to get up. You don't have to go to bed earlier. There isn't like an extra skill. It's just turn everything off and just come back to yourself. Just come home to yourself. And even if it's just to say, hi, how's it going in there? It's just a beautiful thing to just have those little touch points.
I have a huge grin on my face right now. That is great recommendation. Can't wait to do that tonight. Kristen Manieri, where would you like people to go to find you, connect with you and your work?
Oh, just my website, KristenManieri.com. They can find, there's actually a daily centering practice course, a free course that people can take there, and podcasts and those book recommendations that you were talking about is all on there. So yeah, just my website.
That's awesome. We will link to that in the show notes. Kristen Manieri, author of Better Daily Mindfulness Habits and the host of the 60 Mindful Minutes podcast. This has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for all of your work and your willingness to discover mindfulness in yourself, and then also be willing to share it with the rest of us in a way that's very practical and very helpful and very kind. You do awesome work, and this was an amazing conversation that I will really treasure. And I'm so grateful for you and for your willingness to come on our show. So thank you very, very much.
You're so great. You do such great work. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely. It's been an absolute honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.